So, Joe.
Yes, sir.
1876 is not just when Anheuser-Busch got started. Did you know that?
I did know that.
You did know that. Do we have the sixth of something here in St. Louis? Always kind of cutting edge.
Because we are a city of firsts. So, absolutely.
Can you dig it? I can dig it.
I can dig it.
This is the Can You Dig It podcast. We crawl into the crypts, gardens, and forgotten cemeteries. Join Dan Fuller, your resident cemetery chronicler, and Joe Shields, the plot-loving development exec, as we unearth the dark secrets of St. Louis and Bellefontaine Cemetery and beyond. From garden geeks to history buffs with a taste for the macabre, as well as fans of iconography, this is your podcast. We love diving deep into the shadows of history. Let's dig in.
Well, we are back with Can You Dig It? My name's Dan Fuller, and I have the extreme pleasure of being with my cohort and co-worker, Joe Shields, who happens to be our Director of Development at Bellefontaine Cemetery and Arboretum. And we are actually on location today, but I'll let Joe let you know where we're at.
So, I'm Joe Shields, and it is my pleasure to be with Dan Fuller, Bellefontaine Cemetery and Arboretum Cemetery Chronicler, the know-all, end-all of what we know, our history, our stories. And we are also joined today by a very special guest, John Hughes, owner of Hughes Funeral Alternatives LLC, and we are at Hillcrest Abbey.
And that makes me very excited.
Yes. John, welcome.
Thank you very much. Truly honored to be here to be on this podcast.
So, John, please tell our listeners about Hughes Funeral Alternatives and the building that we're in and some of the buildings that surround us.
Sure. So we opened up Hughes Funeral Alternatives in 2017. We were located in a small building off South Grand. We are Missouri's first and only provider of alkaline hydrolysis, or what we call...
Oh, you're going to have to explain that.
Cremation. We'll get to it.
Okay.
We were there until 2023, I do believe, 2 or 3. Quickly outgrew that building. We were looking for a new space. We were approached about purchasing Hillcrest Abbey Cemetery. We spent a couple years renovating the Missouri crematory, which is on the grounds of the cemetery. So this now is our office or facility that houses the alkaline hydrolysis machine, where we meet families, we conduct services. We also still serve families that have spaces or niches here on the grounds of the cemetery. We've been here for 2 years and just as happy as we can be.
So I'm always about turning back the clock.
Yes.
So before we get to that better explanation of what alkaline hydrolysis, we in the United States, believe it or not, did not have a retort or a crematory until 1876, which in history is relatively recent, and that was done in Pennsylvania. We are now on the grounds of the 6th crematory in the United States. So this was cutting edge. It is the first crematory west of the Mississippi. That kind of sounds like us, right? First garden cemetery west of the Mississippi, first retort west of the Mississippi. And what I find so interesting about it, and my little segue into alkaline hydrolysis, as this was cutting-edge technology in 1876 and 1880 for Hillcrest Abbey, which is where we are. We now are talking about alkaline hydrolysis, which is something relatively new and cutting edge. And so this building and this structure, historic, is still keeping up. And what the heck is alkaline hydrolysis?
Funny you should ask. So alkaline hydrolysis, the easiest way to think about it is if we were to bury somebody just in the soil, specifically like a natural green burial.
Yeah, we know about that.
You know about that. Okay. So the alkalinity of the soil would break down the remains over a period of years. Okay. We've done a great job here in the U.S. of delaying that process. Caskets, vaults, embalmings, all that to slow the natural decomposition of a body that's in the soil. Alkaline hydrolysis takes with water and natural alkali that mimics what the burial does in the ground, speeds up that process. So what the ground does in 2 years, we're able to do anywhere between 8 to 10 hours. At the end of the process, the family would receive the same mineral bone ash that you would be given in an urn, just like you would with fire-based cremation.
Great. And I know from at least my perspective, a big asset from that standpoint is it is a much lower carbon footprint.
It is. So per case, alkaline hydrolysis versus fire-based cremation, ours is 18 times less the carbon footprint of that of a fire-based cremation. We're using 90% less energy, and there's zero carbon emissions that's put off into the atmosphere, which is why we get a lot of families that want to come and do this for the family members. And we also have the aspect of we're not exposing their loved ones to harsh heater flames.
Right.
So we're using water as opposed to fire as that main vehicle to break down remains over the period of hours.
I think that's a little more palatable for some folks.
It's a win-win. I don't understand why folks would not want to go down this route because of the environmental aspect of it.
But this is one of the things I say constantly at the cemetery is there's nothing more personal than your final place of rest and your disposition. So for everybody, there's something a little different. My favorite group of people are the ones who like to be cremated, but they don't like the heat, so they're in our air-conditioned columbarium. So, different things for different people.
So, John, I know you just explained the material difference, but what about the cost of it?
So the cost is going to be very comparable to fire-based cremation. Okay. The average price of a cremation here in the St. Louis market is anywhere between $1,500 and $1,700 for a direct cremation. We're on par right along with that. Okay. Well under what a burial cost is, which it exceeds $7,500 now. So it's very comparable when you do it towards not only cremation, but well under what a traditional burial costs.
So how did you get involved with this process? Because you are the only person right now doing this.
In the state?
In this region? In
the state, yes, sir. So just out of pure, I don't want to say luck, but I started working at a funeral home when I was 15 from Farmington, Missouri. I had aspirations to actually just stay there my whole life, and you make plans, and they say make plans and God laughs. Came up here for mortuary school and have a family here now. I'm married here now and worked at a funeral home and provided traditional services and fire-based cremation to families, and was just very happy. And it was just on a whim that I learned about alkaline hydrolysis in a funeral trade magazine, which, believe it or not, they have those. And just reading it, and it just kind of, this would work. It was, I've never liked the aspect of putting my loved ones in open flames and heat. And to each your own. If that does not bother people, right. I don't want to take that away from somebody. That was my personal preference. And then I learned about the environmental advantages, because as working in the business, I never thought about the carbon emissions that were going up in the atmosphere with fire-based cremation. It's something I just didn't even think about. I really just kind of wanted the funeral home I was working for at the time to offer this, and they just said it wasn't for them. At that point, we had no children, so we just kind of took a leap of faith, found a machine, purchased it, opened up in a really small garage on South Grand, and just took it away from there.
And now you know the rest of the story. But now I want to tell you about the story before that.
Yeah. So, John, not only do I love your business model, but I love the fact that you're taking a historic piece of St. Louis and restoring it, which is the crematory itself and then the columbarium next door.
Correct. So, again, just kind of fell into our lap, right? We were looking for a bigger building to offer services or to even have another machine if we wanted to. And we were approached by the owners of Hillcrest Abbey, and it was, a very fair proposition to us. And we love really just the layout of the building. We're like, this works great. We really wanted to marry the first alkylation machine in the state and the first crematory building in the state. And we thought that was, it's kind of neat.
That's
right?
really cool.
And I don't think I really, in my ignorance, understood the gravity of taking over a cemetery that's as old and prevalent as Hillcrest Abbey, just all the history, which is truly an honor. It's a lot of work, but it's something that we've really enjoyed learning about the cemetery business and, learning more about who's buried here, who's interred here.
Or who's passed through their door.
Yeah, who's been cremated here. Yeah. So it's just truly has been a joy and an honor to learn about all this.
And this is where I have to bring up Elizabeth Todd Terry, the very first person who was cremated at Hillcrest Abbey, who was the daughter of Albert Todd, who actually was one of those kind of movers and shakers in St. Louis who said, we need this Hillcrest Abbey, the first crematory west of the Mississippi in St. Louis. And his daughter turned out to be the very first cremation. She died in April of 1888, and in May she was brought here for cremation, and she was taken then to Bellefontaine Cemetery in Arboretum to be laid to rest. And so she is resting with us, but she spent a little time here at Hillcrest Abbey.
I can dig it.
Yeah, I can dig it too. This is where I have to jump in too, in the fact that now that John said he's from Farmington, I have to make sure that we're not related somehow or another. But I actually have relatives who are cremated and laid to rest here in the columbarium. It's actually in the extension. There's a lot of activity that went on here, first building, and then there was a little annex put onto it. And in 1973 and 72, I have August and Rosella Gleiber. Now, this is where we really play with the whole genealogy thing. How are they related to me? They are my brother-in-law of my second great aunt.
Wow.
Makes your head spin, right? It's a good thing I have software at home that helps me explain that kind of stuff.
I couldn't try to imagine that on a tree.
No. So anyway, they're in the tree. It might be a far-off branch, but they're in the tree.
So I'm used to Bellefontaine Cemetery, where it's just it's a historic rural cemetery. I'm going to ask you guys a question about 19th century burial practices. So how popular or how prevalent were columbariums and being cremated versus burial in the 19th century?
It wasn't. It was a little bit unusual. And this is the cycle of history and the fact that cremation for a deceased was almost the predominant. And then we get into a particular era, and especially with the Puritans here in America, full body to the ground it will remain. But then the German freethinkers are the ones who are most credited with helping create these retorts. And that definitely is the case for us in St. Louis. We had a whole entourage of German freethinkers. And I know that, again, Mr. Todd was one of those. And he wished to be cremated, but he passed before Hillcrest Abbey was created. So it fell to his daughter to pick up that legacy.
So, John, operating this cemetery and this crematory, do you have records like books of the dead like other cemeteries have, rural historic cemeteries?
We do, because it opened up as just a crematory first, right? Before even the columbarium was open, and obviously before the cemetery and the mausoleum was here. So we have a cremation log that was just started with number 1. And that was Miss Terry that he just talked about. And it goes all the way up to the numbers, every cremation they've done there.
Including a Frank.
Frank James.
Okay.
So Jesse's brother. And, not only is it interesting to look at just the history on how far back it went, but that's essentially all the records that we have, which to me as a funeral director is mind-boggling that they were able to do just the cremation on writing down somebody's name, and then they just said for the urn, delivered. Obviously, for Miss Terry, we know that urn was delivered to...
Touchdown.
Yeah. So how many people appear in the crematory log?
Thousands.
Wow.
But really, because it was in operation up until the early 1990s. So taken over by the family that bought Hillcrest Abbey from... I think back in the 50s or 60s or somewhere, they operated as a crematory. So they did cremations for other funeral homes in the area. In saying that, there are literally thousands of names within these logs. We have multiple books, we have printouts, we have Excel sheets, just a lot of information that we have.
And maybe in the future, we'll talk about a few more of those that passed through their hands and made their way to Bellefontaine Cemetery.
That's a great partnership. So how many people are buried in the cemetery proper?
As far as the cemetery itself or with the columbarium?
With the cemetery.
Okay, cemetery. So in the cemetery that we have located behind the crematory, we have about 95 lawn crypts. There are about 45 burials there. And then we have in the mausoleum itself, we have over 500 individuals interned there.
Okay.
It's a lot going on here at Hillcrest Abbey. And, if anybody does want to come check it out, it is at the intersection of Sublet, which also has a connection to Bellefontaine. We'll talk about that sometime in the future, and Arsenal. Interestingly enough, that we are here at basically the intersection of Sublet and Arsenal, there's another Bellefontaine connection in the form of William Sublet, who happens to be an early fur trader for St. Louis and owned much of the property that is on top of this hill. In fact, he was buried here initially, disinterred, reinterred at Bellefontaine Cemetery. So just a neighbor to Hillcrest Abbey.
Again, an example of just because you're dead doesn't mean you quit traveling.
No, never does.
Nope.
When we come back from our break, we'll definitely talk about some other folks at Hillcrest Abbey.
I can dig it.
Got a dream, a passion, a product, a service, a brand you want the world to know about?
In a world of noise, you need a way to cut through. And today, the most powerful voices aren't the loudest. They're the most specific.
Niche podcasts are exploding, building loyal, engaged communities around every topic imaginable.
Listeners aren't just tuning in.
They're connecting,
trusting,
and buying.
You don't have to be a tech wizard or a radio pro to make it happen. We get it.
Your expertise is your passion, not production. That's where we come in. At Trevian Entertainment Group, we handle the heavy lifting. From recording and editing to getting your show on all the major platforms, we provide a turnkey solution. We're the award-winning producers behind some of the world's most successful niche podcasts.
We'll help you craft a show that sounds polished, professional, and powerful. This isn't just about starting a podcast.
It's about building an authority, creating a community, and turning your dream into a thriving business.
Don't let your voice stay silent. Go to TrevianStudios.com, TREVIAN.com, and start your podcasting journey today.
Can you dig it? We're at Hillcrest Abbey. Very exciting for me, a very other historic spot in St. Louis, and it's actually kind of in my neighborhood. I'm living just across Targrove Park from Hillcrest Abbey, and we're here with Joe, our development officer, and Mr. Hughes, whose accommodations he is so kindly hosting with us.
So, John, please tell our listeners about the buildings on property.
Okay. So there's 3 buildings on the property. The one that we're in now is the actual Missouri crematory. We're in the lower level of that, which is what we call our active funeral home, so to speak. So we have our office, our arrangement office. We have a preparation care center, and then we also have our alkaline hydrolysis unit is here. We even have a viewing window that if somebody wants to watch the process start, they can do the alkaline hydrolysis process. Believe it or not, we have a lot of families that want to witness the start of the process, so that's why we include
their final
the window.
Goodbye.
Mm-hmm. Just above us is the historic chapel, which was the original chapel built on the crematory where individuals brought here for a cremation would go up into the chapel for a committal service or a service, and were actually lowered in front of the family on a hand crank elevator down to the lower level where we are now for the retorts for the fire cremation. So that's one building. We have the columbarium, which is just a building where your family is at that houses urns in niches, and we also have a outdoor mausoleum, indoor mausoleum with a chapel as well, that we're able to have services and final viewings and memorial services and gatherings here for families if they so choose to do so.
So what's the year on that more recent structure?
I believe it's somewhere around 1970-ish is where it was.
Because it's very neat juxtaposition between the historic columbarium and the new mausoleum columbarium. And it's actually a very beautiful space with wonderful stained glass windows that a service could be held at. So they have a little bit of something for everybody. And kind of like us, and I know this little usually blows some people's minds. We've had weddings at the cemetery, and I know we've had weddings here.
We have had a wedding here. And like you said, a beautiful stained glass window, especially at high noon when the sun's right behind it.
It really
that light comes down and the stained glass goes dabbles on the carpet. So it's just a beautiful space, whether you're getting married or having a memorial service or whatever event you might want.
Yep. Now, I know there's something else that you are doing here that's a little bit new, and that is a scattering garden. Can you explain a little bit of that?
So we have it's actually a biodegradable urn garden. So we will mix aquamated or cremated remains with a special soil mixture. We will hand dig a grave, place them into the ground, and because of the soil mixture that balances out the pH and a lot of science behind it, and it's just way over my thinking capacity, they will return to earth 100%. So we're actually able, within a year's time, to go back and reuse these spaces over and over again. And the families are aware of that. They know that their loved one will go into the space and they completely be returned to nature. And they like the fact that it's not taking up a large footprint of ground.
Right.
So we're not taking up a lot of space that can be used for years to come. And directly behind it, we have pillars with plaques with the names of the individuals that are laid to rest there. So why they might be returned to nature there, that family can always come back for a permanent place of memorialization to
I think that's the important thing. One of those aspects that, again, from more of a genealogy side, is the fact that though people do cremation, a lot of times they feel like that's the end aspect, when there really is one more step to take. And that might be putting in an urn or having a natural space or something of that nature. But it's important for people of the future to be able to come back and say, this is where this person's story came to an end. We get that a lot at the cemetery because we do our fair share of genealogy, and for future generations, as we talked about before we even started the podcast today, more and more cremation, more is important as far as where did those cremains go to.
So Dan, what other historical connections tie Bellefontaine Cemetery to Hillcrest Abbey?
Well, I really look for more in the future, especially as John said, he is able to potentially digitize his logs, and we can maybe look into that. But a gentleman who has a real deep connection to Bellefontaine Cemetery, who is not buried with us, but is buried here in what I love is niche number 747 in the columbarium, is Emil Boll. And Emil was a prolific photographer in St. Louis. Almost any of our archives, whether it be the University of Missouri St. Louis or Mercantile Library or Central Library, they have a collection of Emil's photography. And he even got out to Bellefontaine Cemetery before his death in 1919. He got out there about 1890, and he took a whole series of photographs that we use of the cemetery. In fact, that's one of the things, as the chronicler of the cemetery, I've been posting for especially our volunteer and our internal staff to know what those buildings were like, because as Joe and I know, and now you will know, we have a program going on at the cemetery where we're actually bringing some of those buildings back online. And so Emil Boll took a wonderful picture of Amherst. Do you want to let them know what's going on at Amherst?
It was every bit of a year and a half ago that the cemetery received a gift, and it allowed the cemetery to restore a 2-story home and a gatehouse that sits at one of our Broadway gates on Broadway Avenue. And the gate is called the Amaranth Gate, named after a grain. And so we refer to the 2-story house and the gatehouse as Amaranth House and Amaranth Gatehouse. So the buildings are just about 100% restored. We hope by the end of September that they'll be completely online, and they're going to be used for a myriad of meeting spaces, classroom spaces for kids, beginning and ending tours. So we're very excited that those buildings are going to come back online.
Yeah, and those are our oldest above ground buildings. That's
from 1877.
Yeah. Oh, look at that. In stereo even.
So, John, what do you see maybe that's on the future cutting edge of your industry?
That's a good question, right? In just talking about this, I couldn't help but almost feel like how when they first built this place, how probably they felt bringing cremation to St. Louis. And now I'm in the same place trying to bring aquamation to St. Louis, going through maybe that same, not struggles, but just kind of perseverance of just education is letting people know that this is an option. But we're just trying to grow aquamation. It's really hard to bring something into an industry that honestly in America has not changed since the Civil War. And that's our biggest hurdle, is just education. But we are getting a lot of people not only ask about this, but we hear about composting, which I don't know if you all have talked about that or not.
We've talked about it.
You talked about it. But
yes.
I think we're an easy call for people who are interested in that. So we do aquamation, so we must do composting. So I would say probably once or twice a month we field a call. We don't offer it. It's not legalized in Missouri yet. I think it's coming. But see maybe that's the next thing that's coming beyond aquamation.
And again, it's that return to nature, an alternative. We were talking just a little bit about why people choose things, and I just want to reiterate, this is a personal decision, and people, I always call it the people who pick paper over plastic, Tesla driving, Prius driving folks are going to be more attuned to what kind of a carbon footprint they're leaving behind. And so they want to leave as less as possible.
Absolutely. And I will say this until I just get blue in the face. We never want to push aquamation or services on anybody. Our hope is that everybody does know that it is an option so that they can make decisions that work best for them. The most heartbreaking thing that has happened a few times is that people have found out that we exist after it was too late. And to me, that's just... that's the education. It's sad, right? So my job is just to get out there and to educate everybody, whether they like it or don't.
And I can dig it.
I can dig that all day long.
Okay. So that's my personal goal in all this. It's just to let people know we exist.
Well, I cannot thank you enough for letting us be here. And again, I'm hoping you see this as the open door that we can do some things in the future. We have a myriad of cremated remains at Bellefontaine Cemetery. Where did they all come from? So I'm sure some of them passed through the doors here of Hillcrest Abbey. And I do want to point out that there is, if anybody's hunting for some more reading and even some images, Body to the Purified Flame is a book that was done about Hillcrest Abbey by Jason Engler. And so if you Google that, you can usually find one of those. And it's got some wonderful historic images of the grounds. And it does a little bit better explanation and going into a deeper aspect of why cremation came around at the time it did. And again, a very big change in, we'll call it the United States, as far as their concept, as far as what comes next.
So, John, if I wanted to learn more about Hillcrest Abbey or Hughes Funeral Alternatives and even contact you, how would I do that?
Well, anybody can go to our website 24/7, obviously, at hughesfa.com, or we can be reached 24/7 by phone at 314-250-8433. Whether you have questions about the cemetery or a loved one here or want more information about aquamation, we're always available to talk.
So, John, I know enough to be dangerous. I know that, the difference between aquamation cremains is a whiter end result where traditional retort is gray. What other differences are there in that? And has your exposure to this changed your attitude about your own final disposition?
So a couple differences. Somebody that is going through our process does not have to be placed in any sort of cardboard container or casket before the aquamation process, unlike cremation. You're going to get about 20 to 25% more ash returned back in an urn. Some families really like that aspect, and some, really doesn't matter, right? But that gives more options to, if they want to, do burial, or of course everybody has the jewelry pendants now or whatever. So that's just more options for families. In my personal preference of what I've learned with aquamation, it's, to me, like I said, to each their own.
Right.
It just seems more peaceful to me than what a fire-based cremation. And we've heard that from families. We've also had families that say, for whatever reason, we like the fire aspect. That's fine too. My personal opinion, that it just seems more calmer and gentle than the fire retort.
Yeah. I think those Vikings are the ones that like the fire.
Thanks for listening to the podcast. Also, please share this episode with your family and friends if you got value from the episode as well as the podcast. You can do it right from the platform you are listening on. Plus, take a screenshot and tag us and tag yourself. We are at Podcast Can You Dig It on Instagram. The Can You Dig It podcast is produced by Peace Off Productions and the Trevian Entertainment Group.